In this video, I'm going to talk about the ways you can have voice therapy and the format really. Now, most of it is individual, it's one-to-one. Get referred or you've referred yourself, you see a voice therapist, and it's a one-to-one process, which involves an exchange actually of trust and mutual respect and practicing things together. That's the way that most therapy takes place because every voice is personal, every voice issue is personal and has different influences. So it usually needs a very individualized and targeted and supported approach. But of course, there are times where a group session might be very helpful. Now, in private practice, this doesn't happen as much, but in the NHS, this happens more. One of the reasons for group therapy is that it is more cost effective. And for a service, it can be more time efficient to group people together, and especially if the people grouped together have a similar type of voice problem. But even if they don't, there are certain issues, things that we call voice care or vocal hygiene, that can be covered in a group session. And that's things like how to take care of your voice, how drinking water is good for your voice, how certain things to be avoided are good for your voice. But there's a bit of a limitation to that. In terms of targeting the actual treatment, there are some exercises that could be universal, but at some point, having an individual session or two will be very useful for most individuals. But the other positive spin-offs from groups are things like just meeting other people with voice problems can be really helpful, quite reassuring. Sometimes it's quite isolating when your voice isn't working very well, or it's just nice to know that you're not the only one who's got that problem. So they can be a little bit more supportive in that sense, sometimes a bit more fun if the group gels really well together, and sometimes an opportunity to hear other people ask questions. You get some answers that perhaps you hadn't thought of. The positives to me of groups are often the camaraderie that happens with them and the fact that it can be quite a supportive process. However, in my own practice, I generally prefer one-to-one sessions, and that's the majority of the way that I work. I prefer actually to see people one-to-one, and there are some cases where group sessions are useful afterwards actually, especially sometimes for voice feminization or things where people need to build their social skills and vocal skills confidence-wise. But for individual voice problems, a one-to-one approach generally works very well. I've heard many stories from clients about their experiences of voice therapy previously, and very often they would have been offered a group session in the NHS and attended it or them, and always there's something to take away from the group. They would have found something helpful, especially the voice care advice or the general advice, but often they've found that issue needed more help, didn't quite go away, and there wasn't much individual follow-up. And this is often because departments have limited resources. And they say that what's helpful is an approach where they get a targeted, individualised therapy. And for some people, that will be required. That's the advantage of individual and the advantage of groups, but also the disadvantage of groups often is that you can't get a very tailored approach. If your problem is minor, though, it might be all you need. If you've had some group therapy and it was a little bit helpful, but you think there's still an issue there, don't worry, in most cases, people will need follow-up with some individualised therapy. Every therapist and every service has its approach, sometimes just out of preference, sometimes out of need, sometimes resources. Whilst my approach, my favourite approach, is to work individually with clients, there is always a place for some instance of group sessions or even conversation partners or even putting people in contact, having support from somebody else who's been through that condition or had that kind of treatment process. And if clients are interested in that, there's usually always other clients who've offered to be contacted and are happy to talk about those issues. Individual targeting, but also support networks from other people, other resources, and some group therapy when it's helpful. If you found the information helpful, please subscribe to the channel and click the like button.